Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the joint subcommittee briefing with the Transportation and Environment Subcommittee on Appropriations and our counterparts from the Budget and Taxation Committee on the Consolidated Transportation Program with the Maryland Department of Transportation. We appreciate Secretary Slater and his whole team being here, as well as my Vice Chair, Delegate Krim, Senate Chair McCray, and all the other House and Senate members who made the time to be with us. We know that the Maryland Department of Transportation, I think, is just finished. Hopefully you're finished with its 24 jurisdiction tour of the state. Of course, we all participated on that in our local jurisdictions. This is a chance to provide a little bit more of a statewide perspective on the forthcoming CTP. And of course, things have, I think, transpired hopefully in a positive direction since the draft CTP came out. One, I think the revenue picture probably looks slightly better than it did in September, although maybe not monumentally better. Certainly it looks better than it did last September. Of course, we celebrated Infrastructure Week. Secretary Slater had the pleasure of a great infrastructure day. In the morning, he was in Baltimore with the President of the United States, and in the evening, he had to listen to the Montgomery County House delegation and Senate delegation drone on at our CTP day. So he really celebrated Infrastructure Week in style. So obviously a lot to talk about there. As a co-equal branch of government, these subcommittees, I think, are both very interested in ensuring adequate oversight and shared partnership in allocating resources in the first instance, and not only responding to what has been predetermined through the process. So with that, let me turn it over to Chair McCray for any opening comments.
Thank you, Chairman Corman. Just want to say to my group, I see my senators on here, see Senator Edwards, and see the rest of the PSTE crew. But Secretary Slater, as the good chair has stated, we have a significant amount of opportunity that's in front of us, very large responsibility and big shoulders your way. We look forward to what you have to say in reference to the direction that the state of Maryland is going. Thank you again.
And I think with that, Secretary Slater, we will turn it over to you to drive this train with you and your team before we get to everyone's questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Chairman McCray, Chairman Corman, Vice Chair Krim, and members of the committee. Thank you for having us here today. For the record, my name is Greg Slater, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Transportation. I am here today to give an overview of our draft 6-year Consolidated Transportation Program, more commonly known as the CTP. It covers fiscal years 22 to 27. First, I want to take a moment and introduce the team that is here with me today. From the State Highway Administration, we have Administrator Tim Smith. From the Maryland Transportation Authority, we have Executive Director Jim Ports. From the Maryland Transit Administration, we have Administrator Holly Arnold. From the Motor Vehicle Administration, we have Administrator Chrissy Nizer. From the Maryland Port Administration, we have Deputy Executive Director Brian Miller. And from the Maryland Aviation Administration, we have Executive Director Ricky Smith. Also joining us from the Secretary's Office, we have our Director of Government Affairs, Pilar Helm, our Director of Planning, Heather Murphy, and our Chief Financial Officer, Jacqueline Hartman. I know some of you were able to join us for our local tours that were conducted over the last few months. But for those that were not, I want to provide a quick overview of our program and the current travel status of where things sit today. The COVID-19 pandemic led to record decreases on our system. The good news is that a lot of those trends have recovered in recent months because those record decreases also had corresponding drops in revenues on our transportation program. Today's travel volumes have reached and in some cases surpassed our pre-pandemic levels. During the peak of last year's stay-at-home order, our traffic volumes dropped more than 50%. For the second week of November, highway traffic across the state was 95% of pre-pandemic, and truck traffic even showed a greater surge, now showing 19% above our pre-pandemic levels, reflecting the industry's response to consumer demands. At our toll facilities, transactions for early November were up 1.2% compared to transaction levels for the same period in 2019. During the peak at the stay-at-home order, our toll transactions were down 58%. On the air travel side, at BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport has returned to nearly 75% of pre-pandemic levels, with even greater numbers expected over the Thanksgiving holiday. BWI has also experienced growth in our cargo activity. Total cargo moving through the airport in fiscal year 2021 reached a record 611.4 million pounds. That's an increase of 11% over the previous year. The Port of Baltimore has also seen a robust rebound from the pandemic, reflecting that consumer demand and our growing hub for e-commerce. U.S. DOT Secretary Pete Buttigieg visited the port in July, and just a week ago, President Biden came to see all the great things that we're doing at the port. For more than a year, our Motor Vehicle Administration has operated under that appointment-only environment to focus on the health and safety of our team members and customers. During that time, we have continued to expand our online presence through our innovative Customer Connect system. As a result, our MVA is now serving more customers online than ever before, and serving more people overall than ever before. Our Highway Safety Office has also been hard at work, continuing to improve communication between our partners and to provide more timely information on fatalities so that we can learn from and work to address them quickly. In 2020, there were 573 motor vehicle fatalities in the state of Maryland, and one is too many. That's why we will now be providing monthly reports on our zerodeathsmaryland.gov website, which will show year and to-date fatality comparisons state by state by jurisdiction. This data is also going to show whether the individual was a driver, a passenger, a cyclist, or a pedestrian. Over on the transit networks, our Maryland Transit Administration has continued to play a key role in getting our essential workers to their critical duties. Today's ridership across MTA core services remains consistent. We're getting close to about 60% pre-pandemic ridership on our core bus system, while our other modes of light rail, metro, and MARC are recovering at a much slower pace. We recently resumed full scheduled service on MARC and commuter bus, as we're starting to see some of those riders return to the workplace. Of course, when it comes to MTA, the Purple Line is of great interest to everyone here, but despite the challenges, we are making progress. We're continuing to move forward. We took oversight of 150 contracts, and we now have a new design build contractor. In the interim period, we focused on completing the design, completing the utility relocation, advancing the production of the rail cars, as well as construction of the Glen Ridge operations and maintenance facility. That's a critical location for us in taking delivery of those vehicles to start testing the rail cars. 2 weeks ago, we did select a new design build contractor, and that was announced, Maryland Transit Solutions. They are a joint venture between Dragados and OHL. We're still finalizing the cost of insurance and light rail cars as part of that design build contract, but that gives us one step closer. And we'll be looking to take that back to the Board of Public Works with the upgraded P3 agreement that will have a new cost and a new schedule after the first of the year. The cost and schedule of the design build contractor is just one element of the Purple Line, but the overall cost will include our operating costs, Purple Line transit operators, and technical input on design and construction over the 30 years, as well as Purple Line Transit Partners, oversight and management of the operations and maintenance facility. But once we have all these pieces, we'll be able to answer those cost and schedule questions, which month greater clarity. With respect to the P3 agreement itself, we'll be looking in the coming months to bring that back to the Board of Public Works. On a personal level, I think we can all relate to increases in filling up our tanks or buying groceries, but a lot of the factors are very different today. But the benefits of the Purple Line remain intact. Shifting over to the CTP, you'll find details of the CTP. It totals about $16.4 billion. That's $1 billion more than the 6-year program that was passed a year ago and is on par with our 2019 to 2024 program. The final 21 to 26 program was $15.2 billion. The largest drivers of this increase are an influx of the COVID relief funds that total about $841 million and revenue changes of $488 million. The largest components would be the motor fuel tax that had outperformed our models by about $255 million, and our titling fees that outperformed by about $213 million. This CTP focuses very heavily on system preservation, delivering major projects and laying that base for planning and engineering. Just as important, this CTP is going to help the transportation system contribute directly to Maryland's economic recovery. More than half of our budget, $8.2 billion, is going directly towards state of good repair system preservation, and this funding is critical to bring our bridges, our rail, port, and airport infrastructure into that state of good repair. The draft CTP also allows us to move forward with our major projects, the Howard Street Tunnel, the AB connector over at BWI Thorogood Marshall Airport, our 695 triple bridges, our 695 traffic relief plan, the Purple Line, and then replacement of the American Legion Bridge. Before I leave the American Legion Bridge, I do want to remind everyone that the public comment period has been extended to November 30th. And we're still in the public comment period. Looking ahead, we believe we have weathered the worst of the COVID revenue impacts, with most revenues returning to pre-pandemic levels by 2023. And those COVID relief funds are really helping us bridge that gap. But the reason for our big focus on system preservation is that we have significant state of good repair needs at a backlog in excess of about $7 billion across all modes. Much of that infrastructure was built at the same time, the interstate system, and we have to replace a lot of those assets at the same time. This includes a $2 billion state of good repair backlog on our transit network, $4 billion on our highway network, about $750 million backlog at our two major airports, BWI Thorogood Marshall and Martin State, about $100 million in needs over at the MVA locations, and more than $250 million at the Port of Baltimore. But finally, in this budget, we are fulfilling our funding commitments to the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority by providing $2.7 billion in this CTP. But at the same time, as we're focused on state of good repair, we're also focused on moving forward. And so we're building intelligence across the assets as they come. We are delivering infrastructure projects in a way that tries to incorporate technology and flexibility and future growth, and providing safe and accessible mobility choices for all users, and establishing that customer-focused transportation system that incorporates roadway, transit, freight, air, port, and airport infrastructure. That's the vision that is this foundation for this budget. A big part of how we're going to deliver that is continual investment from our federal partners. We've gotten significant relief from the relief packages, both the CARES package, the CRISA package, and the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And then just a few weeks ago, we had the infrastructure bill passed, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I'm happy to report that our teams were tracking it and we're ready to act as those dollars start to flow. The benefits of this act will be significant. Over the next 5 years, federal fiscal years, we're looking at $4.1 billion in this act for roads and highways, $1.7 billion for transit, $158 million for airports, just to name a few. But these figures do include some of what was previously forecast, so it's not all new money. If you look at the additional funding we're anticipating, those figures are roughly about $1 billion more for highways, about $200 million more for MTA, about $140 million more on the aviation side, and a tremendous amount of discretionary opportunities through grant programs. But I sincerely appreciate everyone's effort in bringing that program together and getting that delivered. While the expectation is it's going to take some time realistically into the next year for the rulemaking and all of that to flow and the dollars to flow, we are standing ready to deliver those efforts once they do. But the CTP meetings have allowed us to hear directly from officials about priorities and collaborate on what those dollars look like. But we look forward to using these funds as a force multiplier in continuing to develop that shelf of projects and advancing more projects from planning to construction. At this point, I'm going to pause and turn it over to Tim Smith, the State Highway Administration, talk a little bit about his program.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. As the Secretary said, I'm Tim Smith, and it's a pleasure to be here and an honor to lead the SHA team. As the Secretary is mentioning, we're concentrating on the next phase of projects our team will be developing and delivering, both with existing funds as well as resources potentially available to us through the federal infrastructure funding. And I kind of want to emphasize three main areas. And for those that have been through us through the whole 24-stop tour, I'll change it around a little bit just to keep you interested. But from those three areas are asset management, accessibility, and mobility. So from an asset management perspective, it's using system preservation philosophy, like the Secretary mentioned, but across all our roadway assets, not just pavements and bridges. We're looking at over 70 plus asset types that must be maintained in a state of good repair. So we're thinking about long-term impact in our day-to-day decisions with that and trying to get the best gain, best return on investment just for the next generation. We're really thinking about that. So just a couple of great examples of that. I know I've spoken with some of you besides roadways and bridges, but we're looking at our drainage structures, just because they were built at a lot of time. Originally, our pavements and bridges were built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, as well as our roadway lighting and traffic barriers were roughly built at the same time. So we're trying to look at all of that across the 360. Accessibility is really about our vulnerable users like pedestrians, bicyclists, scooters, as well as motorists. In 2019, we introduced the context guide that builds flexibility into our design and planning efforts for all roadway users. So it's a bit of a culture shift for us, but also for the entire Maryland roadway industry. So we're on a bit of a learning curve, but we know improving our procedures through the lens of a context guide as well as a Vision Zero goal will make our roadways safer for everyone. And just a couple of quick examples of that. One I think is shining is a US 1 there in College Park, where we're building in pedestrian improvements and bicyclist improvements. But also, I just want to highlight, we will also be, we've been using data, but we'll also be reaching out to the public. So we're also sharing a statewide map of proposed accessibility improvements for those vulnerable users in a public meeting in December. And we want to garner your feedback because we know we need to look beyond the data in some cases because we need to get that feedback as well. Lastly, I mentioned mobility. This is really about projects where we're utilizing the existing footprint and available technology to kind of deliver systems to maximize the efficiency of our infrastructure. So a couple great examples of those are I-270 innovative congestion management improvement projects with our ramp metering along 270, as well as we start to see this next year and the year after, just our I-695 transportation systems management and operations, our TSMO improvements along the Baltimore Beltway. With that, we're hoping to focus on the use of technology as well as using our existing footprint to provide additional capacity during peak hours on the Baltimore Beltway. So in closing, I know we're still maneuvering through these fiscally and mentally challenging times, but SHA will continue to collaborate and partner with our customers and stakeholders to combine the data we have available, but along with the public feedback to make the best decisions we can now, but also for future generations. So appreciate your time and attention. And I'll now introduce our teammate at MDTA, Jim Ports, for their update.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tim. And good afternoon, everyone. For the record, my name is Jim Ports, Executive Director for MDTA. This past year, the MDTA made great progress in preserving Maryland's toll facilities and developing projects and studies to serve Marylanders into the future. The MDTA implemented temporary all-electronic tolling statewide in March of 2020 as part of its COVID-19 response, and we made all-electronic tolling permanent in August of 22. Construction for highway speed all-electronic tolling on new gantries and the removal or partial removal of existing toll plazas is underway at Fort McHenry Tunnel, JFK Memorial Highway, and the Nice Middleton Bridge. On November 16th, 3 highway speed middle lanes through the former JFK toll plaza opened to traffic on an interim basis until permanent AET conversion can be studied, designed, and constructed. And a study is underway for the I-895 Baltimore Harbor Tunnel Toll Plaza and interchange improvements, which will allow MDTA to bring highway speed all-electronic tolling to the Harbor Tunnel. Major construction on the new Nice Middleton Bridge project kicked off last July. The new bridge will double the vehicle capacity, improve safety, replace the toll plaza with high-speed all-electronic tolling, and will continue to allow tall ships to pass beneath. The new, wider, safer bridge is expected to open in early 2023. The Bay Bridge Automated Lane Closure System, which we call the ALCS, is a project constructed for opening and closing lanes for two-way traffic operations on the bridges. The ALCS will enhance the current manual system for motorists by allowing maintenance crews to remotely implement and discontinue two-way traffic on the Bay Bridge's eastern and western shores. The ALCS will include overhead lane use control signals, dynamic message signs, horizontal swing gates, and illuminated pavement markers. The ALCS project includes reconstruction and realigning US 50 eastbound in the former toll plaza area. And in the fall of 2022, the automated lane closure system will be in place in both directions. Also, in February, the Tier 1 draft environmental impact statement for the ongoing Chesapeake Bay Bridge crossing study was made available for public review and comment at baycrossingstudy.com. the MDTA held in-person and virtual public hearings in April, and the comment period ended in May. We expect to identify a selected corridor alternative and publish a combined final environmental impact statement and record of decision in the winter of 2021-2022. In May, the MDTA announced the opening of the first public comment period as part of the toll rate range setting process for proposed hot lanes for Phase 1 South, American Legion Bridge, I-270 to I-370. The MDTA held in-person and virtual public hearings in July, and the first public comment period for the proposed toll rate ranges ended in August. A second public comment period was held in September 30th through October 28th to receive feedback on MDTA staff recommended toll rate ranges. And as a result of the comments received during the first comment period, the recommended toll rate range reflected a new base minimum per mile toll rate of 17 cents per mile, which is lower than the initial 20 cents per mile proposed in May. The 17 cents per mile is consistent with the base off-peak minimum per mile toll rate for the ICC. And on November 18th, the MDTA board voted to approve the final staff recommended toll rate ranges. The approved toll rate ranges can be found on our website, mdta.maryland.gov. Last December, we reopened the newly constructed I-895 bridges north of the Baltimore Harbor Tunnel 2 months early. The new northbound and southbound I-895 structures replace the MDTA's only structurally deficient bridges in its inventory. Major ongoing statewide projects also include a $1.1 billion I-95 express toll lanes northbound extension program to relieve congestion and improve travel along the I-95 corridor northeast of Baltimore. Construction began in May on the major project to widen northbound I-95 between Maryland 43, which is White Marsh Boulevard, and Maryland 152, which is Mountain Road, to make way for extension of the 2 northbound express toll lanes. The extension is expected to open to traffic by 2024 to Maryland 152, with the full extension north of Maryland 24 open to traffic by 2027. In June, a new park and ride lot opened at the intersection of Maryland 924 and Woodsdale Road near the I-95 interchange at Maryland 24 and Maryland 924 in Abington area, Harford County. The multimodal park and ride has 365 spaces and accommodations for transit, ride sharing, bicycles, and pedestrians. Lastly, the I-95 at Belvedere Road Interchange Design Build Project is a partnership between the MDTA and Cecil County and the Stewart Property Management, Inc. in coordination with Federal Highway Administration. The project received $20 million in federal build grant funding, which was authorized in September of 2020. The preliminary design of the interchange is complete and will be finalized by the design builder. Right-of-way acquisition activities are being finalized, and right-of-way clearance is expected in the fall of 2021. Proposals have been received from the design build teams, and the contract award to the selected design builder is anticipated in the fall of 2021. And construction is anticipated to begin in the summer of 2022. With that, I'm happy to turn it over to Administrator Holly Arnold.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone. I'm Holly Arnold, Administrator for M.MTA. First, I'd like to thank the Secretary for sharing the great news on the Purple Line progress. This critical project will spur transit-oriented development and drive economic development around future Purple Line stations across Prince George's and Montgomery County. MTA is one of the largest multimodal transit systems in the U.S., operating a local bus and commuter bus network, as well as light rail, metro subway, MARC train service, a comprehensive mobility paratransit system, and we support locally operated transit systems statewide. Our goal is to provide safe, efficient, and reliable transit across Maryland with world-class customer service. The COVID-19 health crisis really highlighted the critical role that transit plays in connecting the region's residents to employment, healthcare, education, and other essential services. And as Secretary Slater noted, I'm happy to report that overall ridership has returned to 55% of pre-pandemic levels, with local bus ridership now at 65% compared to the pre-pandemic. And I'm happy that all of our modes have returned to full scheduled service at the end of August. MTA continues to make significant capital investments in state of good repair projects to ensure the transit system remains a safe and reliable transportation option for the region. Federal relief funding from the CARES Act, the CRISA Act, and the American Rescue Plan Act have filled operating funding gaps and state of good repair needs. Some of our key state of good repair investments include over $400 million to replace the Metro subway rail cars and signal system, $160 million to overhaul major systems on our light rail trains to ensure reliable service, $54 million to overhaul 63 Mark III passenger coaches, $210 million for a 5-year contract for clean diesel buses, $238 million dedicated to rehabilitating and renewing our Metro track tunnel systems and stations, and $264 million for repairing and rehabbing light rail structures, track systems, and stations. MTA is really going to continue to prioritize funding for state of good repair projects across all of our modes, with a particular focus on those older assets. That said, we're also preparing for the future of transit. Recently, we published the agency's strategic plan for the next 5 years. It's titled Rebuilding Better, Committed to an Equitable Transit Future. And the plan is going to guide our recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and identifies priorities to create a brighter future for transit by focusing on technology, communication, and collaboration, with equity as a central focus. These commitments build upon the strong foundation and progress MTA has established to improve the transit experience and system reliability for our riders. The full plan is available on the MTA website for review. In May 2021, MTA announced, as part of the Regional Transit Plan implementation, the launch of 2 RTP corridor feasibility studies. Transit corridors are those that show demand for transit and are opportunities for us to really explore new transportation modes, schedules, routes, and infrastructure. We're currently studying 2 corridors, a north-south corridor between Towson and downtown Baltimore, and an east-west corridor between the Bayview community and Ellicott City. We look forward to continuing implementation efforts and moving forward on the 30 strategies identified in the 5-year RTP action plan, of which over 20 are already underway this year. As part of our commitment to delivering on the RTP goals, MTA was recently awarded $22 million in a 2021 Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, or a RAISE grant. With additional investment from the state and from Baltimore City, this $50 million project will facilitate faster and more reliable transit trips and strengthen multimodal connections along the east-west corridor currently served by the CityLink Blue and CityLink Orange. MTA is also undertaking the first 50-year statewide transit plan. The draft is expected to be available for public comment by the end of the year. This builds on existing regional and local transit plans across the state and will outline a 50-year vision for transit in Maryland, defining transit needs across the state for those future generations. We look forward to continuing to work with stakeholders across the state to develop this long-term vision and framework for coordinated transit service in Maryland. As ridership continues to grow and travel patterns change, MTA remains consistent in our unwavering commitment to our riders. As part of this commitment, this CTP dedicates $43 million to transit network improvements to improve the customer experience. These include improvements for new dedicated bus lanes, bus stops and transit hubs, including ADA improvements, wayfinding, and bike and shared mobility. These investments really demonstrate MTA's priority to accelerate rider-focused initiatives and projects that provide meaningful benefits to the communities we serve. MTA is also committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and is aggressively transitioning towards a zero-emission bus fleet. This CTP invests over $269 million for our zero-emission vehicles program, bus pilots, and bus procurements. Finally, MTA makes a significant investment to the locally operated transit systems across the state by providing $89 million in operating capital grants to support local transit operations. And in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the lots will receive a total of $276 million in federal relief funds to continue to support those transit operations and capital needs across all jurisdictions. Thanks for your time, and I'll now turn it over to Chrissy Nizer at the MTA.
Thanks, Holly, and good afternoon. It's great to be with you this afternoon. At M.MBA, we remain focused on continuing to provide that premier customer service, both inside the branch offices, as well as alternatively through our online services, as well as our kiosk and mail-in services. As the Secretary did mention, we are still appointment only, but that has actually allowed us to serve more customers more efficiently. So if you look across our branch offices, we're actually serving more customers than we were pre-pandemic, and also serving them in an expedited manner, which is a great thing. The pandemic has really allowed us to reevaluate the services that we provide to customers. And I want to once again thank the legislature for some changes that we had to make to statute to make things a little bit more efficient and allow customers to do things online. That includes the ability to renew your driver's license or ID card 12 months in advance as opposed to 6 months. The fact that your vision certification, if you get that done by your eye doctor, is now good for 2 years as opposed to 1 year. That'll allow more people to renew alternatively, as well as allowing people to use a photo when they come in, say they need to get a duplicate or corrected license. They can now use that photo for the next time they need to renew, hopefully allowing them to do so outside of a branch office. We do continue to do more transactions than ever online. When you look at March through August of this year compared to the same time in 2019, we're actually up 45%. And in large part, that is because of our system modernization called Customer Connect. We are at a really exciting juncture for our organization. As I reflect back, since I joined over 15 years ago, we've been talking about IT modernization. I know many of you through the budget process are very familiar with our old mainframe-based systems. We were fortunate, even during the pandemic, to be able to deploy our vehicle-related systems. We've already modernized that. And in 2 weeks, from today, December 6th, we go live with our driver licensing system. So we're really excited once that happens. Everything will be in that one single platform, not only giving our agents interacting with customers real-time access to more information and more data to provide better responses, but also for the first time ever allowing the customer to establish their own MBA online account, to have access to any correspondence we sent, get all the information related to their vehicles, their driver's license. If they're a CDL driver, get information related to that as well. So the amount of information that it'll be able to provide to our customers, as well as the enhanced flexibility, is something we're just really excited about. Team's been fully trained, and we're really looking forward to that December 6th go live date. I will mention that in order to complete this modernization, we will be closed on Friday, December 3rd. It is a little easier notifying customers because obviously it's appointment only, but that is an unusual thing. So I wanted to draw it to your attention so that everybody is aware. That allows us the time to migrate. As you can imagine, all the data that has to move from the old system into the new system, we need that extended weekend in order to be able to make that happen. So a lot of good things coming with that, a lot of new additional online services, and even things for like CDL drivers, where currently they have a 5-year expiration date for their license. They'll be able to get an 8-year license just like the non-commercial drivers do. So a lot of really exciting things coming with Customer Connect, and we certainly appreciate the legislature's support of that investment in our IT system, which frankly is for us, like the highways are for State Highway Administration, really just critical to what we do. Real ID has been another project that obviously you've been very interested in. I want to provide you the latest numbers there. We are now up over 84% Real ID compliant, which is pretty phenomenal, especially compared to the national averages. The last one released by DHS was in the low 40s. So Maryland is doing very well. The good news is that deadline was pushed back to May of 2023. So that gives Marylanders more time to become Real ID compliant during their regular renewal period, not having to come in outside of that time. We're also very committed to highway safety and making sure we're working with our partners to reach the goal of 0 fatalities. We know that it was very unfortunate. Even during the pandemic, we saw various dangerous driving behaviors, high rates of speed, dangerous maneuvers on major roadways. And unfortunately, as traffic started to increase after the pandemic, those dangerous behaviors did not shift. So we're continuing to evolve our messaging campaign and our outreach to customers. In addition, we work closely with local jurisdictions and advocacy organizations. In September, Governor Hogan announced more than 12 million highway safety grants to over 90 agencies and organizations. We're also actively pushing the Be the Driver campaign, really talking about individual responsibility each time you get behind the wheel. we strive to be the best we can in everything that we do, but I have to close by saying that really it's our employees that make it happen. They've been out on the front lines during the entire pandemic, working to make sure Marylanders got the goods and the services that they needed from MBA, and I really couldn't do anything without them, and certainly grateful for all their wonderful service to Maryland residents. I appreciate your time today, and now I'm going to turn it over to Brian Miller at the Maryland Port Administration.
Good afternoon. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. For the record, I'm Brian Miller, Deputy Executive Director of the Maryland Port Administration. Good to see some of you who were able to join us this past summer for our tour of the port. As far as the port goes, we have really bounced back strong since the early months of COVID-19 that impact the entire maritime industry. All the port's key cargo commodities, cars, containers, farm and construction equipment, along with machinery, paper, and general cargo up significantly since that time. We have seen double and even triple digit increases in our cargoes. Some categories are even beating pre-pandemic numbers. The Port of Baltimore is not experiencing supply chain congestion issues that are affecting other ports. In fact, due to congestion at other ports, we recently attracted 2 new container services that total 21 new ships. We have many local distribution centers, an excellent truck and rail network, and very skilled longshore workers, which all contribute to the reasons why containers and cargo move efficiently through the Port of Baltimore. On the cruise front, we have been working since March of 2021 with the CDC and the cruise lines and restart protocols. Carnival started cruising from Port of Baltimore on September 12th, and the Royal Caribbean is scheduled to restart from Baltimore on December 23rd. Happy to say that all the Carnival cruises have been very successful, and it's great to have them back. On the investment front at the port, we are making significant investments to make sure we can remain as one of the busiest ports in the nation. We have more than $250 million in the pipeline to modernize and upgrade infrastructure, which doesn't include our need to maintain 135 miles of navigable channels at $100 million annually to ensure they can support the larger post-Panamax ships. Seagull Berth 3. Speaking of larger ships, dredging was completed in April of 2021 on the second 50-foot container berth at the Port of Baltimore Seagull Marine Terminal. The deeper berth will allow the port to accommodate 2 ultra-large container ships simultaneously. $10.5 million is budgeted in the CTP from the state for that project. 4 supersized Neo-Panamax cranes arrived in Baltimore back in September. The cranes are undergoing rigorous testing, and the operators will be trained on them in the next few months. We expect them to be fully operational in the first quarter of 2022. Howard Street Tunnel. We're working closely with the Federal Railroad Administration. The Port Administration recently announced the approval of the finding of no significant impact, otherwise known as a FONSI document, for the planned expansion of the tunnel in Baltimore. The project will reconstruct the CSX-owned 126-year-old tunnel to allow for double-stacked intermodal container trains to and from the Port of Baltimore. This project would generate 6,550 construction jobs, while an additional 7,300 jobs will be created because of the increased business. This project in the current CTP includes $202.5 million in state funding, and then following the final CSX engineering permitting, we expect construction to start later this year or beginning of next year. As far as construction goes on our terminals at Dump Marine Terminal, we're also reconstructing Berth 3 to better accommodate larger and heavy pieces of farm and construction machinery, and also larger roll and roll-off ships. $28.7 million is allocated to CTP for this project. And lastly, we're also expanding our Cox Creek dredge material containment site on additional dredge sediment from channels leading to the Port of Baltimore. Continuous dredging is necessary to accommodate the supersized ships of the day that head to our port. $57 million is budgeted in the CTP for this project. And thank you very much for your time. And I'll now turn it over to Ricky Smith from the Maryland Aviation Administration.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. And for the record, I'm Ricky Smith, Executive Director of the Maryland Aviation Administration. Throughout the pandemic, we've collaborated with state, federal leaders, public health officials, and our partners to ensure safe, healthy airports for our customers and employees at BWI Marshall and Martin State Airport. Our airport communities remain focused on providing healthy and safe travel. The strong recovery that we have experienced reflects the confidence that our customers feel with the safe, comfortable travel services we provide and that they receive. In fact, the recovery at BWI Marshall leads the region with growing passenger traffic and new airline service. I am particularly proud of the work from our employees during the pandemic and the fact that BWI Marshall was named the top North American airport in its size category in the 2020 Airport Service Quality Awards program. The SQ program recognizes global airports for delivery of the best customer service as measured by passengers. To receive this honor during the pandemic, the most challenging time in our history, was a remarkable achievement and something we're very proud of. Throughout the pandemic, we continue to innovate and provide new services and amenities for our passengers, like the $48 million 5-gate extension of Concourse A that offers new food and retail concepts, upgraded restrooms, and more capacity for Southwest Airlines, our major hub carrier. And our new state-of-the-art electric vehicle charging stations, which are an important collaboration with BGE to boost charging infrastructure in our region. Moving forward, our capital program remains focused on improving facilities and services for our customers while creating opportunities for domestic and international air service. As Greg mentioned, system preservation and resiliency are major focal points for MAA's capital program. Driven by the need to provide exceptional service to our customers in the safest, most reliable, and efficient manner, system preservation projects include an airport-wide restroom renovation program, aviation fuel storage replacement and expansion, electrical feeder replacements, airfield lighting vault upgrades, and passenger boarding bridge replacements. Additionally, as a designated aviation reliever, the BWI Marshall improving the facilities at Martin State Airport remains a key component to maintaining an efficient regional aviation system that balances the needs of commercial, corporate, personal, emergency response, and military aircraft operators. After a short pause due to the pandemic, we are moving forward with a major multi-year terminal improvement to the center of operations for Southwest Airlines, the largest airline partner at BWI Marshall. The Concourse AB Connector and Baggage Handling System project will transform a major portion of the airport, creating an enhanced travel experience for passengers and supporting future growth for Southwest Airlines. The improvements will include direct concourse-to-concourse connectivity for passengers, new food and retail concessions, modern restrooms, and expanded airline hold rooms, all sitting atop a new state-of-the-art baggage handling system. The large-scale project will be largely funded by airport revenue bonds, which we issued for the first time ever this past summer. The bond issuance was well received by rating agencies and investors. We also are moving forward on major site preparation and utility work that will support construction of a major aircraft maintenance facility for Southwest Airlines, the first such maintenance hangar in the Northeast corridor for the carrier. MAA will continue to support aviation in the airports across Maryland by working with our 35 public use airports in the state. For the statewide aviation grants program that provides important state funding and support for airport improvement projects, the MAA intends to administer $1.6 million in grants during fiscal year 2022 for regional airports across Maryland. I want to thank Secretary Slater for its continued support for the state's aviation system. As the global aviation industry continues to recover and rebound, across MAA, we're working to provide excellent service for our customers. We remain committed to excellent service and convenience for our customers at BWI Marshall and Martin State Airport. With that, let me turn it back to Secretary Slater. Greg?
Thank you, Ricky, and thank you to everyone for those great updates. I'll now turn it back over to Chairs Corman and McCray for any questions you may have, where our team is available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks to your team. I should congratulate in this forum Administrator Arnold on her designation for a permanent role in that position, and warn Administrator Nizer that she's probably going to be put in charge of vaccination soon, given her success rate with Real ID. Very high percentages there. I'm sure my colleagues have questions, so I'll ask them to use the raise hand function. I will ask one while they are gearing up. I have many. I'll start with one. First of all, Mr. Secretary, can you just talk a little bit more about your framework looking at the infrastructure bill? There's sort of two basic types of streams, as you covered. There's the formula funding, and then there's the discretionary funding. You know, how do you think those formula funds will be used in terms of your priorities there? And then the discretionary funding, in my mind, that's a little bit more about the network of the future kind of stuff. So what types of projects are you hoping to prioritize there? I mean, I know we don't need it for the I-270, I-495, P3, as you've told me many times. So what are the other big think projects you're hoping to advance?
Sure. Just kind of looking at the additional dollars, just let me reiterate them to kind of start. It looks like $1 billion more on the highways front, roads and bridges, about 200 million more coming in. These are formula funds coming in for MTA, and about 140 million more on the aviation side. So, I would maintain that I'd like to continue to put at least half of our dollars back into system preservation until we can continue to address that backlog of state of good repair projects. When it comes to, let me start on the MTA front, continuing to advance some of those corridors coming out of the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan, but also the evolution into our electric vehicle or electric bus fleet. And so that's going to need some significant investment, not only on the buses themselves and the vehicles themselves, but also the infrastructure and the workforce training that's going to come with those. Over on the highway front, system preservation off the top, but then kind of laying the foundation for a couple of different types of projects. One is transportation systems management and operations, how we're using ITS and technology to manage congestion, but two, on the safety front. So, we've got a tremendous need throughout the state for probably more specifically in the urban arterial area, in kind of rethinking some of those roadways to make them much more of a safer environment. The port is really about continuing to modernize, but to address that state of good repair backlog. The airport is very clearly in this modernization front mode of really trying to bring the airport up to today's standards and facilities. And then MVA, it's really about the facilities themselves. We are making a significant investment into the MVA headquarters in Glen Burnie in this CTP, and that's an investment that I would argue has been needed for decades. It just rethinking the traffic flow around there in particular, and the building as well. But just really on the formula side, focused on system preservation, but also kind of laying that D&E program foundation. I do want to kind of manage expectations. Just on the highway front, $1 billion can go pretty quickly especially if you're taking kind of half of that off. But on the bridges front, we have addressed a tremendous amount of interstate bridges all at the same time, but just continuing to focus there. The grant opportunities, I think, are going to probably be more on the aviation front. It's things like air traffic control towers, those types of things where we really need a heavy investment. But on the port side as well, we're trying to get that third 50-foot, that third deep water berth. But then on the transit front, looking at things like the RAISE grants and those types of things. So we think there are going to be significant opportunities on the grant side for electric vehicle charging, and a lot of those development of that program will come out for, in particular, greenhouse gas emissions type efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I actually think there's some formula funding your department gets for electric vehicle charging, even though in Maryland, I don't think that's actually usually flowed through DOT. I've actually taken to sending you all via Ken Weaver, our great staffer who organized this, the federal funding opportunities as they show up in the Federal Register, because frankly, I've been able to get great information from the department about your engagement on federal grants, and they're about to increase pretty dramatically, although they've been up quite a bit this past year because of the various federal support programs that you described earlier. So can I get your commitment here that you all will keep us much better updated on your pursuit of federal grants, what you're looking at, what you're applying for, expected timeframes, and so on? We can force that through the JCR also, but I would just rather an agreement between us here to have that communication work back and forth a little bit better.
Absolutely. Let me see if there's maybe a report that we can develop and send out, every month or so on kind of the grants that we're pursuing. It's funny, over the years, we found kind of a formula that we feel like helps us achieve success. Trying to find partnerships, like we have a partnership with Baltimore City on an east-west corridor right now in the RAISE grant program that we were just awarded, and just kind of bringing those partnerships together. But also, I've just found it really rare to be successful when you're bringing the base amount of match funding. You try and get up to 40 and 50% match funding, you're going to be much more competitive versus the standard kind of 20%. But I think it's a fair question. Let me see if we can come up with a report to kind of say these are the grants that we're pursuing, because frankly, we could use any support and lobbying for those grants at the same time as well.
Great. Let me ask you just one more or one and a half more quick ones before I turn it over to Chair McCray. Just I want to make sure I understood what you were saying about the purple line. It sounded like you said 100% of utility relocation and 100% of design has been completed during this period. Did I misunderstand you?
No, maybe I'm hoping I didn't say that because it's not completely done. But what we focused was on design, permitting, and utilities during the interim period. We've been able to get most of the utilities out of the way. There's still some Verizon utilities that have to be moved. We were able to get most of the design done. There's some final pieces that have to be done, but we do now have all permits in place. All the stormwater management permits are all in place for the purple line.
I mean, I would be curious to know how the cost of the utility relocation compared to the initial estimates, because as you know, that's an issue with a lot of projects.
Sure.
So it's just something to think about. Let me turn it over to Chair McCray.
Senator Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, two quick questions. The 4.1 billion over 5 years, you said 1 billion of that's new money. Does any of this all go to state projects, or does some of this go to the locals, or are they supposed to do their road stuff out of the CARES money they got over the last year for the next 2 years?
Yeah, so the formula dollars are all kind of state, but we do have some partnerships there. And then as the revenues go up and down, the percentage for highway user side goes up and down with those revenues. Now, the out in your area, the bill does include another 1.2 billion for ADHS. And so that's an additional 69 million for Maryland.
You're talking about the Appalachian Roads money, or whatever
Yes, sir.
correct terminology is?
Yes.
That's a question from a couple people, particularly a business person. So could you send me something in writing, actually what we're supposed to do over the next 5 years and how it's going to come in, and maybe a little update on where we are with Pennsylvania on the whole project? Because if they, it seems to me what we're getting would meet our demands to finish our part. And hopefully we might get enough to finish their part. So then maybe the next 10 years, we could complete this very important project out here. So if you could just add updated information, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely, sir. I'll follow up in writing, but we're moving forward on that kind of planning piece for that northern section, Connection Virginia. We're getting about 69 million in Maryland. Pennsylvania will get 92 million. So, you know, we know that 69 will meet our needs. It's just a matter of kind of where Pennsylvania would want to focus, but I'll follow up in writing with you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Edwards. Let me turn to Vice Chair Krim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Administrator Arnold, am I the first one to actually say that in a formal meeting? I hope so. So I listened to your updates on transit for Central Maryland. And as I've told you before, I still want to advocate for the rural areas of Maryland and getting more transit there. We definitely need it in Frederick County. We have a transit system in the city, but beyond the city, our transit is very limited. And I have had, even though it's not my district, I do get requests from the mayors of these rural areas about transit. So could you comment on that? And then, Mr. Chairman, I have one more question.
Absolutely. And we're always supportive of more transit across the state. It's something that we hear frequently from, I think, every jurisdiction, right? We go on these CTP tours, and more funding for transit is definitely a priority. And folks really want to make sure that their constituents have access. So we're working right now on our statewide transit plan, which is looking out kind of 50 years over those needs of transit and all the jurisdictions. And I think that's a real opportunity to take a look at what urban and rural and suburban transit can look like over the next 50 years. It's not just 50 years, hey, we're going to do it, but breaking that down into kind of bite-sized pieces and working with the jurisdictions on how they can start to implement that. I think the opportunities that we have with this federal funding, the federal relief funding, providing an additional, 276 million over the next couple of years is an opportunity to start exploring that. And our Office of Local Transit Support is, happy to support in terms of federal discretionary grants, providing consultant support and coordination on those efforts.
So how would you suggest that we move forward? I know about the 50-year plan, and people on this committee have heard me say I'll be dead by the time any of that comes to fruition. But, we have issues now. We have the largest increase in senior population in the state of Maryland and Frederick County, and a lot of that is in the rural areas. So we do need more paratransit and transit. So how do we do something now on this?
I mean, I think the first step is, again, submitting it through our annual transportation plan process with our Office of Local Transit Support. And we can continue to work to get those transit services set up. I mean, most recently in Baltimore County, they launched the Towson Loop. It was their idea. They came to us and we provided technical support assistance to kind of really make sure that it's set up and coordinated in that way. And we can continue to help in terms of funding. The Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act that just passed has additional 5310 funding, which is funding for people with disabilities and seniors, and 5311 funding, which is specifically for rural areas. So there's some real opportunities that we can work with the local jurisdictions to take advantage of that funding.
Okay, I'll follow up with you about that. So one more question about the safety. Highway safety, pedestrian and bicycles, especially because I think I've seen recently that we've had an increase in deaths and accidents. So do you have any ideas on how we can reverse that trend, Mr. Secretary? I thought myself about perhaps setting up these local work groups that every year they do review their accidents and see whether it's at a certain intersection or whatever, and see how they could improve that. Do we do any of that now? That's my question.
We do, and I can expand on it, but Administrator Nizer would do a much better job at kind of expanding on the local highway safety plans. So we develop our own highway safety plan, but then our local governments have their own and we support them. That's one thing that Administrator Nizer and both Administrator Smith were talking about is we're now going to be putting a lot of that data out to the public where people can see local jurisdictions, how we're performing in different areas, as well as bike and pedestrian. Our numbers are up this year. People are driving pretty aggressively right now. So it's a trend that we're seeing. We're seeing some pretty disturbing trends. We're seeing impaired driving in the middle of the day. We're seeing speeding in excess of 100 miles an hour pretty routinely. But maybe Administrator Nizer can expand on some of the local safety plans and how they can help.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary, and thank you for the question, Delegate Krim. It is something that we work very hard on. So we have supported local jurisdictions in adopting their own local strategic highway safety plans, because as you say, there's a statewide issues, and then that rolls down in a different way for each local jurisdiction. So the Maryland Highway Safety Office, we not only can provide some resources in terms of data, but also just information and support in terms of developing that plan. The Baltimore Metropolitan Council has been really effective. We've supported a grant-funded position with them, and they've gone beyond even the boundaries of the BMC to support local jurisdictions in developing these plans. And it really is about bringing everybody to the table, because as you say, especially with pedestrian safety, we've done various studies of what causes those crashes. Unfortunately, it is about 20-25% of what we see from a fatality standpoint, which is concerning. And so, when we look at those numbers, there's not one universal solution to it, unfortunately. It really is something that you have to, dig into the data to figure out. Not only is impairment by the driver a problem, we also see impairment of pedestrians as a problem. Not only is distraction by the driver a problem, but distraction by pedestrians is also a problem. And so the only one thing that I think you can universally say about pedestrian safety challenges, pedestrians being in areas where drivers don't expect to see them as a recipe for a bad outcome. So it is something we're definitely focused on. If there are jurisdictions who are interested, we have pedestrian review panels in several jurisdictions, including Montgomery and Prince George's County, where we do see a higher number of pedestrian crashes. And so they actually go in and with their Department of Transportation, the Highway Safety Office, EMS, and local law enforcement, they look at those pedestrian fatalities, and like on an individual basis and do exactly what you're talking about, pull them apart and figure out what the causes were. So if there are other jurisdictions, please feel free to reach out to me and we can connect folks together, and love to continue that conversation.
Thank you. Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation from MDOT. Mr. Secretary, we spoke briefly not too long ago. I am fortunate to represent 3 different counties, Prince George's, Calvert, Charles County. And while I do not represent the same areas, all the traffic concerns that we have beginning in Prince George's or ending in Prince George's County are a huge concern. So if you could briefly, one, if you could kind of, I think we spoke about this a week or so ago, keep me updated on any progress in those regions. And secondly, regarding the transportation and the bridge infrastructure on both those fronts and the funds that are available. I mean, we have the federal funds as well as some of the funds that we have available in the state. We spoke of the Garvey bond initiative from last year where the clock sort of got to us. I just think that, as we continue to move forward with addressing our concerns, just want to make sure that, Maryland, as unique as it is, each region has its unique concerns. But I think any region and any and all regions, look, the economic development and the quality of life for our citizens is paramount. So I think we need to all make sure that we're all understanding what resources are available and what partnerships we need to form as we move forward to ensure that we move in the right direction with these projects.
Absolutely, Senator. And just as we're coming off the CTP tours, we heard some pretty loud and clear kind of priorities for that whole region, kind of starting on the southern side, really in Calvert County is both Chalmers Johnson Bridge, but into St. Mary's, but also Maryland 2-4, going to Charles and into Prince George's County, both. They're both prioritizing the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit Plan, as well as continual investment along 301, Maryland 210, as well as some investments around the Beltway at Arena Drive, and then continuing up Maryland 5 for some investment. So those are the clear priorities that we've heard from the county, on top of Prince George's County in particular, focused on transit-oriented development around the Beltway with the WMATA stations.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Mr. Chair, if I might, just a brief comment. I think I'd like to thank your agency with this assistance on a piece of legislation we've been working on for a number of years. We sort of gotten to the point where we all recognize that we need to get away from specific projects regarding speed cameras and other tactics on trying to control everything from pedestrian accidents to just accidents in general, particularly where you have these rural areas. So we have you all helped us get a piece of legislation which allows the local government to make the decisions in conjunction with us to ensure that we have those safety mechanisms in place. So just want to thank you publicly for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Great to see you back on a money committee where you belong. Before I turn over to my colleagues, let me ask another perhaps brief question. There are 3 funds, Mr. Secretary, in the CTP that I know many of my colleagues care about. One is the Kim Lamphere Bikeways Fund, one is the Sidewalk Fund, and one is Highway User Revenue. Of those, Highway User Revenue has a legislative mandate that expires in, I think, with fiscal 24. So fiscal 25, you see a significant drop in the CTP. The Bikeways Fund is not mandated, but it also shows us pretty significant drop in 24, and then I think gets zeroed out in 25 in the draft. And the Sidewalk Fund seems to do quite well throughout the 6-year window. So can you just talk about those funds and what you sort of realistically expect? I'm guessing we're not going to zero out the Bikeways Fund in FY25, but if you could just sort of talk about what you see for those 3 funds.
Absolutely. That was really more of a kind of a programming tool. So let me start on the sidewalk side. Administrator Tim Smith and I have been talking a lot about our sidewalk program and the need for some increased investment there. So you're starting to see kind of that and being that continued investment in not only the ADA side of our sidewalk fund and kind of bringing sidewalks that are out there today up to ADA standards that are not out there, but also filling in some of those gaps trying to address some of the projects that have significant gaps where there's a lot of pedestrian activity. On the Kimberland Fairs Bike Fund, that was really, we have a couple of years funded and then it's just kind of zeroed out in the out years. That is not the intention of how that project program is going to be administered. We will continue to add those funds. It's just as we're trying to kind of build a tight program, sometimes you'd rather bring that cash flow up front to bring that in for the local governments. And then the highway user revenues, we just apply those formulas exactly the way they are written. So we did have a discussion. I'm not sure if the legislature is going to go back and kind of deal with that sunset a little bit, but that was, we administered those exactly the way that the law had written.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Sounds a little strange to budget zero when you know the number is not going to be zero even in the out years, but appreciate your working with constrained resources. Let me turn to Delegate, former Deputy Secretary Kittleman.
Thank you. I have a question for Administrator Smith, but first I want to compliment SHA. First of all, I love the fact that we are coming near to the completion of 32 expansion in Howard County, and Howard and Carroll County are very, very excited that July or so we may actually have a 4-lane highway there. That just construction runs right by the where I live in the community access to Route 32. There was a change made when you switched from one side to the other working on it. And the people who use that on a regular basis recognize that it would be very likely to cause an accident if we didn't get more signing. I brought that to the attention of your guys, and within 2 hours, they had one of those great big signs up. And I just thought that was very responsive and very much appreciated. My question for Ricky Smith is one born out of curiosity. When we transportation people first came in with Governor Ehrlich, I remember that one of the first things that we were given was this big contract that was being done to change over the way that we were going to do the commercial things in the airport. And I know it was controversial, but I think it came out doing very, very well. And I was interested now since I was in our airport just 3 days ago. How is that going? Are the commercial entities being profitable? And it looks like they're staying pretty off. Many of them are not seeming to go away. So I appreciate your thoughts on that.
Thank you, former Deputy Secretary. It's good to talk to you again. So you're referring to the food and retail program that was when you were here. It was the contract was awarded to, at the time, BAA. And it's now Fraport is the name of the company. The program is actually doing quite well. It's won several awards over the last several years. The program, in terms of units, has expanded significantly. We have over 100 operators in the airport now, which is more than 50% of what we had under the old program. Sales have gone up almost 300%. And so the program is doing quite well. We are in the process, however, of doing a solicitation for a new developer. The contract with Fraport expires in 23. And so next year, the first quarter of next year, we'll be putting an RFP out on the street with the expectation to have a new contract approved by the Board of Public Works by the end of 2022. So the model, the developer model that we put in place when you were here, is proving to be a very successful model. So we're going to stick with the model, but it's time to do a new contract and introduce some new fresh concepts to the airport.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Kittleman. Before I turn to Delegate Beitzel, I have a question for Administrator Smith, hopefully a straightforward one. I have been asked by the chair of one of our county delegations if State Highway uses a schedule for mowing and cleaning of state highways, or if it's a little bit more of an ad hoc thing in terms of the order of battle in dealing with these roadways. And I didn't know the answer when I was asked this by the delegation chair, so I'll ask you.
As far as the cycle for mowing and litter pickup, it's typically a 6 to 8 week cycle. It's a lot dependent. We try to get the litter out there first before we get to mowing, because otherwise it creates challenges. But it's typically a 6 to 8 week cycle throughout the summer. But then through winter, we actually back that down because our folks are very focused on winter. But from March through, say, November, it's typically a 6 to 8 week cycle.
So every state highway in every county is checked every 6 to 8 weeks for mowing and cleaning from March to September, or March.
That's the target. Yes, sir.
Great. Do you hit those targets? I mean,
not in every case, because a lot of times it's resource related. And then also we're also addressing customer feedback. So sometimes we have to increase those cycles very much so. So depending on the location. And then we've also partnered with several counties to have very much a blitz and very much focus on those corridors. So we have hitting both state and county roads at the same time.
thank you. Let me turn to Delegate Beitzel.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Chairman. How you doing? My question, I have a couple of questions, either Secretary Slater, but Mr. Chairman, you'd asked a question about highway user revenue funds, and I just wonder if I could expand that a little bit. On the highway user revenue funds, the portion from the federal infrastructure funding bill, are there funds that go directly from that the local jurisdictions have to apply for, or any funds that would go for improvements in the roads and highways in local jurisdictions? How are those funded, or what kind of funding are they getting from that infrastructure bill?
Well, we don't know yet. When they start to lay out the rulemaking side, we'll start to see what pots of money, which ones are competitive, which ones are not, which ones are formula, and then what eligible activities will come in that. We think we're going to have the money start to flow around January after the first of the year. That's kind of the schedule that we're thinking now. And then all of that would have to be introduced as a supplemental budget. So, there's a lot of rules on the money that we don't know yet, and they're not aware. However, all of the discretionary grant programs will have opportunities for local governments.
Thank you. And the other question I have is, due to the pandemic and since we have all the shutdowns and the things that are going on with the COVID restrictions, there's been a tremendous increase in people wanting to get outdoors and get on the hike trails and bike trails and into the state parks. Are there any funds available for improving bike trails or hiking trails through the infrastructure bill and or the state funding? And how do people that are working, like we have a trails committee here in Garrett County, mm-hmm. how do they access those funds?
Absolutely. So there's a number of pots. Some are federal, some are state. We have a recreational trails program and then the transportation alternatives program. They're all eligible. We work pretty closely with Garrett Trails. They've come in for a number of programs over the years, but happy to kind of send you materials if you think that might be useful for them.
That would be very useful. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Beitzel. I do have a couple more questions, Mr. Secretary, around our favorite project, 495-270. First of all, just as a reminder, at the Montgomery County CTP presentation, you agreed to get me some information about the lifespan of the American Legion Bridge. Still waiting for that information. I also want to ask about the timing of the so-called value for money analysis that I know was for some reason was not being done before the product development agreement, but I understand it's supposed to be done before the first section agreement. So I don't know if there was an update on the timing of that.
Yeah, so let me first address your information on the American Legion Bridge. You should probably be getting that this week, if not first part of next week. But we started to kind of pull that number and that information together. And, as we do with a lot of our bridge engineers, it's trying to find the appropriate amount of detail. You can really get into some pretty long answers, but just trying to answer your question as best we can. On the value for money analysis, so as the competition for the construction contract is completed, and you start to get those prices and kind of nail the numbers around the total construction, then you do that value for money analysis. So, that'll be completed, and that will be completed before any construction contract goes back to the Board of Public Works over the course of the next year. But we are still on track to do that. The concessionaire is now in the middle of their procurement process for the construction activities.
Great, thank you. As you know, over the summer, the Transportation Planning Board took an action related to this project and its sort of placement in our regional long-term plan. The governor, through letters and also PAC advertisements, made clear that a number of projects were slated for cancellation if the project was not restored to the plan. It ended up with 5 identified projects in the letter that went to the TPB. The TPB reversed its decision. So I just wanted to check the status of those 5 projects to, make sure that since the TPB did what the governor asked and or threatened, that those projects were moving forward. So I wanted to ask, the first project was the Corridor Cities Transitway. It's MTA-50 page of the CTP. What's that being funded at in the CTP?
That doesn't have any funding in it right now, but we're talking about whether we want to put some seed money into that kind of with 355 as part of the final CTP, just trying to nail that down with the local jurisdiction and what the best way to move forward with that one is.
Okay, seems like a good idea since the governor said that project wasn't going to be funded if the TPB didn't reverse, and the TPB did reverse.
Well,
so the second project, Mr. Secretary, is I think it's State Road 97 and 28 an interchange. It's SHA M-8 page of the CTP. Would you recall what that's funded at?
Well, let me first kind of provide some clarification. The conversation was around the constrained long-range plan, not the CTP. So the CTP holds the funding. The long-range plan is the long-range plan. So what was being talked about was having to remove them from the long-range plan, not remove them from the CTP. But there is no money in the 97 and 28 interchange.
Okay, so the governor was threatening to defund projects he wasn't already funding? I don't understand.
No, the conversation was around the amount of the projects that we would have to remove from the long-range plan to fit an investment in the American Legion Bridge into the plan.
Okay, so just to be clear though, before the TPB reversed its decision, these projects had $0 slated in the CTP. And after the TPB reversed its decision, these projects, the 2 I've gone over so far, have $0 in the draft CTP. I know you're still working on the final.
Correct.
Okay. The third project was US 301. I believe it's in Prince George's County. It's SHA, I guess, PG 22. Is that funded in the CTP, draft CTP?
No, I'm not familiar with PG 22.
Okay, it's the US 301 project. That was one of the 5 projects that was identified as.
Okay.
The next one for the vice chair is in Frederick. It's SHA F10. It's the Jefferson. I think it's Jefferson, Pike, and Ballinger, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Or the US 15?
Yeah, was that funded?
No, that the US 15 was funded, and the one at 85 is not.
Okay. And then the final of the actual 5 that were threatened, good news here. I think there is some funding for this one, Greenbelt Interchange, SHA PG-13. That's funded in the draft CTP.
There's engineering funded in the draft CTP, correct.
Okay, so of the 5 projects that the governor said were in trouble if the TPB didn't reverse, the status has not changed from the before the TPB vote till after. The draft CTP 0 funds for the 5 projects as of now.
Well, they didn't have to be removed from the long-range plan.
Right, but they have $0 going to them during the rest of the governor's term as currently drafted?
That's correct, because in the long-range plan, they lay out timeframes for when they would have to get that investment, and that investment was around the 2020, 2035 timeframe.
Okay, well, I'll express some optimism for my TPB colleagues who reversed their votes that between the draft and the final CTP, maybe there'll be some progress on these projects that I think they were hoping to get some funding for when they did what the governor asked. So I would just encourage you to do that. And let me turn it back to my colleague, Chair McCray.
Thank you, Chair McCormick. Secretary Slater, I know that you touched on some responses in reference to the HUR dollars. You talked about the sunset being removed. Hopefully, I know you talked about from a percentage standpoint, but if you can just elaborate, if you see opportunity for HUR dollars for our local jurisdictions with this new infrastructure money coming in.
I'm sorry, Senator, I'm trying to shut a blind at the same time. But yeah, so the HUR percentage changes when it sunsets. So, that's what we calculated it on. I think the money for local jurisdictions in the infrastructure bill will primarily come from grant opportunities and those types of things. And the rulemaking is still being made up from those dollars right now.
I guess let me just dig a little bit deeper. Do you see any future opportunities from additional state funding from a HUR standpoint by the insurgence of dollars that'll come from the infrastructure bill?
Potentially, I think it's going to depend on the different parts of the state. So for instance, there are some new rules in the infrastructure bill around things like toll credits. And I'm working with Baltimore City on how we can utilize those and help them basically use these things called toll credits as part of their local match and being able to stretch kind of the dollars because they do get direct federal aid.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, I don't see any other questions. I do have one last one, which is last legislative session, you all had the Garvey legislation that Senator Jackson referenced. It passed both chambers, but not in identical form, and we just sort of ran out of time. I was just wondering if you expected to bring that back, and would just encourage early engagement on that. If that's something you're still interested in, we can sort of all work together to get it over the finish line this time.
It is. It's very much a priority for us. It's a good tool for us to be able to use. I understand the legislature wanting to put some kind of belt and suspenders and some bumpers around that. Happy to work with you on that. But we see some big projects that could be a really useful tool. The Frederick Douglass Tunnel is one of those. You know, Senator Jackson talked a little bit, but something like the Thomas Johnson Bridge, some of these really, really big bridge projects or really big tunnels like the Douglass Tunnel are great opportunities to be able to advance those types of projects.
Yeah, so I think I speak for Chair McCray that we both look forward to working with you on that, and I would encourage whoever on your staff is leading that effort to reach out to us sooner rather than later. I'll also just say we have to avoid turning it into a Christmas tree because we obviously all have our preferred projects. I want to see the Brunswick line, you know, sort of expanded. Senator McCray wants to see Bayview Station built. Vice Chair Krim has a laundry list every year. So we just need to be careful that when we're putting the belts and suspenders on, we're not also hanging a lot of Christmas ornaments on it as well. So Chair McCray, anything else from you?
Nope, I just want to join the crowd in reference to celebrating Administrator Holly Arnold, just lifting that piece of it up. Secretary Slater, just thank you for this opportunity. Good to hear about what's going on with the respective agencies on behalf of the Maryland State Senate. Thank you again, Chairman.
And for the House side, I mean, I think we appreciate having this statewide opportunity on top of all you're doing, going county to county for those more local efforts. We really appreciate it. Thanks to all my colleagues, Secretary Slater, his whole team, and our friends in the Senate. And we'll see some of you on December 6th. Thank you all. I believe we are adjourned.